Morning and welcome to the CCIM New York Metro Chapter's State of the Market webinar. My name is Al Holloman, a founding member and board member of the chapter. The New York Metro Chapter covers the 5 boroughs, Westchester, Long Island, and Northern New Jersey, and is comprised of professionals in finance and lending, law, asset management, brokerage, and appraisal, to name a few. Our mission is to elevate our members to the highest levels of success through education, networking, and industry-leading best practice tools. We encourage you to consider joining the chapter and take advantage of the networking opportunities, as well as taking our courses, which are open to anyone seeking additional knowledge. And FYI, you don't have to be a CCIM designee to join the chapter and participate in chapter activities. If you'd like to know more, you can visit our website at ccimny.org or contact one of our members directly. And with that, I'm going to get things started and turn it over to our moderator, my friend and colleague, Ian Grusd. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Al. A pleasure to be on today's program. I am Senior Vice President at Marcus & Millichap, part of the national auction team. And I'm thrilled to have our industry expert, Ann Hambly, founder and CEO of First Service Solutions, with us today. Ann has been involved in the CMBS industry for more than 35 years and ran many large servicing shops before creating First Service Solutions in 2005. She's grown First Service Solutions into the preeminent CMBS borrower advocate practice and is the author of an industry bestseller, CMBS 911, a member of the board of directors of the Counselors of Real Estate, and previously served as the chairman of the board of directors for the Mortgage Bankers Association. Ann has received many professional awards and recognition, including induction in the Commercial Real Estate Hall of Fame by Real Estate Forum, and named as one of the most influential women in commercial real estate by National Real Estate Investor. She lives in Dallas, Fort Worth, and boy, what a great guest we have today. Great timing, and it's my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I'm going to go over today the landscape of CMBS and non-CMBS, so just commercial real estate debt. I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing, what the options are for owners at the time of a maturity, because that's one of the huge issues we're all facing today. Some creative structures that we're running across, the biggest opportunities for brokers right now. And I'm going to cover a case study, which is a creative structure that I think you'll all want to hear about. So that's my topics. The landscape today, you've all probably heard this 100 times lately. If you log into any podcast or anything, this is what you hear. And I'm saying it a lot, so I assume I'm hearing it more often than not. But there's about 5.9 trillion of commercial real estate debt. So we all know that. About half of that is maturing in the next 4 years. I say that again, almost half of it is maturing in the next 4 years. And of the maturing loans, in the next 4 years, $1 billion of that is office debt. So 5.9 trillion, I'm sorry, 1 trillion, not 1 billion, 1 trillion. So 5.9 trillion is commercial real estate debt. Half of it matures, almost 3 trillion in the next 4 years. And 1 trillion of that 3 trillion is office debt. So those are big, big, big numbers. So you would say probably historically, I think what we'd conclude is, wow, great opportunity if I'm an originator, because there's a lot of new loans I need to make. The problem, I'm preaching to the choir for many of you, but the problem today is that many of these loans are not able to refinance. Office deals, I probably don't need to even say, but I've heard some amazing, interesting information lately that, and I tell my staff, can you imagine loaning today on an office building that's for a 10-year loan? So what will the office infrastructure look like in 2034 or 35? My goodness, that's astonishing. And there's nobody that could comprehend, I wouldn't suspect, what our world will look like in 2034 and 35 with how technology is advancing. Now try to make a 10-year loan on a brick and mortar infrastructure that is going through significant changes, right? I've heard recently that the industry expects that it will take 4 or more years for the tenancy to kind of shake out. So we know that some tenants will renew, some will renew at reduced rents, some will renew at reduced space, and some won't renew. And a lot of them have leases that expire in the next couple years. So we really won't know for another 4 years probably where the office market will shake out. And there's very few, if any, lenders out there. I'm aware of a few. They're very creative. They're able to take risk and they can make deals, but they're generally not sufficient to pay off your existing debt. Multifamily, that's a huge component of all of this debt. And those have the loans that are maturing are, 3 and 4% interest rate. I saw one the other day at 2.9% interest rate. Today, those rates are going to be, you guys know it better than me, but probably 8-9%. So if it did cash flow back 10 years ago, today it kind of doesn't at the higher rates, not to mention the higher cost of insurance and the more conservative underwriting I think we have today than we did 10 years ago. So multifamily in general is not able to refinance. So if you're an owner or an originator or a sales broker, this is an important thing to know. So what is of this half of our debt that's maturing, what are our options? What are an owner's options? Well, number one, they can refinance, of course. Often that means they have to make a big capital contribution out of pocket to do so, but sometimes that's less painful than the alternative. So that's one option. The other is sell the property. And many, many owners, I think, are resorting to selling their property today because there aren't any better options. Maybe they didn't want to sell, but that's my only viable option today. You can extend your current loan where the lenders are willing to do that. And I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. The problem here, which I'll cover later, is the new money that's required to extend. So if you're at, if your LTV today is, call it 90%, 100%, and you're going to want to extend, you're going to have to put new money in. Well, how does that make sense? And how do you get that back? And the fourth option, which a lot of people are doing, you're reading in the press all the time, is you can hand back your property. These are non-recourse loans. And for the most part, there's plenty of easy ways to not trigger recourse. Not all, but a lot of the large owners, as you've read every day, are just handing back their properties. And that's non-recourse. Here you go. I had my life and time with it. Now you can have it, lender. So there's a lot of that happening too. Okay, now what my firm does, Ian introduced me. I spent my career, as Ian said, and I couldn't word it any better than he did, so I'm not going to say anything different, but I ran a lot of the large servicing shops. I created my firm in 2005 to help owners, primarily at the time with CMBS debt, maneuver through the process. So every day, all day, for the past 20 years, I have been working with special servicers, all of them every day. That's why my hair turned gray. I'm really only 25, but anyway, so I'm sitting in this, I think, catbird seat. I see what they're all doing, what they're all willing to do, what they're not willing to do. And I want to share with you what in general I'm seeing in the marketplace. I'm seeing a lot of delay and pray. We used to call it extend and pretend. There's some of that also. Delay and pray, I think, is a higher level. Extend and pretend is, I don't know. I think delay and pray is like a lot harder level of we're just going to close our eyes and just pray that things get better. We don't have any real pretend scenario we can come up with. Delay and pray is happening in a lot of ways. A lot of people, when you know as an owner that you're not going to pay your loan off at maturity and you need help, you ask for your loan to go to the special servicer. I think most people that have any familiarity with CMBS understand that by now. But if not, the master servicer cannot grant you any extensions on their debt other than a 60-day forbearance to get the loan paid off. But they can't do anything for you. You have to go to the special servicer to negotiate and get your potential resolution. You don't have to take what they give you, but you have to be in special to get it. That's a big misnomer in the industry. You can't call your special servicer, have a nice conversation, figure out what the options are, and then make your decision. You have to get to special to do it. So anyway, I'm going to use the analogy in case anyone hasn't heard me, but it would be no different than me driving on a road here by my house. Posted speed limit is 55. I pull a policeman over on the side of the road and say, excuse me, can I go 58 in this 55? The answer is always no, right? Their role is to enforce the rules. Same with the master servicer. Okay, now, once the loan transfers, then there's about 90 days to get an appraisal. The appraisal dictates if the appraisal comes in and it's less than the debt, the special servicer has to book a appraisal reduction, which is an alert to the bondholders that, hey, there's going to be a loss here potentially, and here's about the amount. And those appraisal reductions in the CMBS 2.0 world we live in after the 08 downturn sometimes causes there to be a change in control. So as a special servicer, if I have a heavy office concentrated pool, and I'm getting a lot of requests to transfer loans in because that pool was originated for the most part in 2014. Now all the loans are maturing in 2024. I got a lot of office deals coming at me. I might want to delay and delay and delay getting them to me, number one, because once I do these new appraisals, I'm very likely going to not have a job in that pool. So there's delays, all kinds of delays in recognition of real values. There's extend and pretend, if we can kick the can down the road. And this case study I'm going to share with you in a minute is an example of that. Let's do that. We'll deal with it later. There's a lot of let's deal with it later. And in fairness, a lot of that is because who knows what the real value is today. I don't think anybody would testify in court that this is the value of this property today because they're all educated guesses based on what's going on in the market. And there's a lot of hot potato going around. So you will notice this financial institutions with a lot of office debt exposure are selling off notes. There's a lot of trading. And, if I can convince Ian to take my problem, I would love to do that. The people are trying to transfer the issue around. So you'll notice a lot of that, but no real recognitions of the issue financially yet. Now let's talk about extensions and what they look like. Because that's what most people are saying. Well, if I have to sell, hand back, or put a bunch of money into refinance, let's talk about an extension. So extensions all require some new skin in the game. The contribution is not set in stone. You'll get quotes from a lender, but they are negotiable, and you can contribute them to a reserve so you can use it over the next couple of years as opposed to a pay down. The LTV is not a real hot issue, believe it or not, at that time. The problem really is when you've got, and there's a lot of these, and I'm sorry to keep using office. You could use any property type, but the biggest one out there right now with this issue is office. Let's say I'm going to use a real example of one. The debt was $240 million, San Francisco downtown office building. The value of the property was 110, call it. I think it's less than that now. Okay, so the servicer said, well, I'll extend this loan for you, fine, but I need new capital into the deal. Now, there's not one human being on the planet that would put new capital in above 240 million of debt. And if there was, I couldn't find it, right? So, so the problem is, it's like nobody will put money in, okay? So unless you reduce your debt. Well, I'm not going to reduce the debt today because I don't know where the value really is going to be later on, right? So there are creative structures, which I'm going to get into, that address that issue. It'll incentivize an owner to put money in, and it allows everybody to get out and ride out the market a few years. And you probably are all thinking, I know what that structure is. It's called an AB structure, and everybody's heard of that. Everybody heard of it in 08. But an AB structure requires the lender to write the debt down to the A note, and that's what they're not willing to do today. So what we're seeing is more back-end solutions kick the can down the road at the current debt amount and solve it in the back end. So we're getting, I'm going to get into the structure here in a minute. There's a low volume of actual foreclosures and REOs occurring today. I did a list recently, in fact, before this presentation, of all the REOs where the foreclosures already occurred in CMBS, and there's very few in 2024. There were some that happened previously, but very few. The reason is the hot potato. Who wants to be the one holding this property today? So one of the ways a servicer will deal with an owner saying, hey, look, I'm tapped out, right? You can have this property, or there's not enough, or it's empty. There's no income in, is they put a receiver in the property. We're seeing a lot more receiver appointments. I encourage owners to ask the servicer for a receiver appointment if there's no income coming in. That takes the burden of the owner having to advance the money out of their own pocket. And if you have a lien or waste or anything like that to the property, that can make the loan recourse. So there's good incentive for owners and servicers to put receivers in. Receiver will allow the servicer to stay in for a long time, let the receiver manage the property while you ride out the market. So which keeps them from having to foreclose. Now the biggest opportunity for brokers right now. So if you're a sales broker, I've had so many conversations with sales brokers over the past 6 months, and I think every one of them, I think Ian, you were an exception. I know you're not a broker, but we talked about this. Most people are saying the opportunities of fish are biting in this lake. If I go to the loans and special servicer, or I call, pick your favorite, Eleanor, Rialto, and I say, please consider me when you're ready to foreclose on the property, or please consider me as a receiver, or let me have the listing once you foreclose. There will be plenty of those opportunities, but they're going to be a number of years down the road. The opportunities today are dealing with the maturities. And I think what it is it's not a problem with the property. Like in 2008, we had property distress. So everybody was chasing those properties that were in distress. Today, we have borrower distress. Borrowers are anxious because they have to do something. It's not that the property is necessarily in trouble. It's that I have to do something and there's no new debt. There's nothing to help me today. So that's where that's where I know the issues are. Let me go through a case study, and then Ian, I'm going to hand it to you because I know that, I was going to take like 20 minutes. I'm almost at that time, but let me go through this case study. We just closed on a creative modification I think capsulizes everything I said today, and I just thought I would cover this one. So the property was cash flowing today. It matured in May of 2024. The only real problem was a valuation issue. The property was upside down. So owner couldn't get a new loan. And how many loans do we know of like that today? Cash flowing today, but it's upside down. You can't get out, right? Now, again, significant capital was needed on the property over the next couple years. Who's going to put that money in, right? So normally in the past life 2008 downturn, we'd say, well, that's ripe for an AB structure. Let's ask the lender to write the debt down to the value today, put new capital in, etc. The lender doesn't want to do that. Servicer won't do that today. Property's cash flowing at the higher debt. Only issue is the maturity and your ability to knock it out. So the solution became a back end, that's my definition, not theirs, but a back end AB structure. It worked like this. I call it a hybrid AB. I don't know, just to pick a name that sounds a little better. So the debt remained at the current debt amount. The borrower put in the new capital that the property needed over the next couple of years. And hear me out. You might think, well, that was a really dumb move, but let me get to the end here. The borrower earned a preferred rate of return at market on that new capital, and the loan was extended 3 years. So you have the debt amount remaining the same, maturity extension. That's all that it looks like in the data that you see out there in the marketplace. There's no write down, there's no valuation issue, everything looks fine. But the deal between the servicer and the borrower was that in 2027 now, when the funds are, flow through, you refinance or pay it off, you pay off a prescribed A note amount, which was based on the value at the time you did this modification in 24. So it's in the document, but it's not written down today. So you pay off the A note, you get your new capital back plus your pref, and the remaining money is split 50-50 to borrower and to lender, and the remainder of the B note's written off. Okay, now that's no different than an AB, except there's a big difference. That is that the loan is not written down today. It doesn't impact the servicer's position and ability to stay in the deal. There's no losses showing in any of the data. All that you see is a maturity date extension. So when I see these reports about, oh, good news, all the data looks great, things are flushing through, we got just all this wonderful stuff going on, I know from my seat in view in the industry, there's a lot behind the scenes that is not available in this data. I'm not suggesting anything other than that as a factual statement. There's a lot of things being done that are creative that get the problem pushed out into the future. So with that, Ian, I'm going to stop there and let you take over or ask questions or whatever you want to do next. So
Thanks so much, Anne. And I anticipate we'll have some questions for you at the end.
sure.
Just a quick comment that I'll share is I strongly encourage all attendees to go to Anne's website, sign up for her mailing, and be notified. She does continuous webinars, and I always learn something new. And a question I have for you is your service specific to CMBS loans or any loan which is challenged?
Any loan which is challenged. Thank you for asking that, Ian. In 2005, I opened the company specializing in CMBS. But once you do CMBS, you can pretty much do everything else. And I have always in my career. So we do all kinds of debt, many non-CMBS structures. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, Anne. So we have a great lineup of panelists today. I'm going to have them each individually introduce themselves, but we'll be covering capital markets with Brian. We'll be covering the office market with Lee, and we'll be covering the industrial market with Tom. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, for an introduction. Capital markets, it's a great tie-in to what Anne has shared. If you could please let us know what company you're with, what you focus on geographically, and some insight into what you're seeing in your sector.
You bet. Thank you very much. So I'm Brian Whitmer, founder and managing partner of RE Propco, and focusing on brokerage advisory, management, as well as investments. And I specialize multifamily, industrial, and land. And as I had spent 20 years with Cushman & Wakefield and still working on a lot of legacy sales assignments there, as well as moving into the consulting on a larger scale for big developments. And I'm really felt that we have crossed over an inflection point that happened a few months ago when the Fed moving the rates down was not an if, but when. And then it became, is it going to be 25 or is it 50? And I think everybody is, watching very intently what's going to happen tomorrow afternoon. And once you saw it first, in the institutional capital, because the private capital, didn't want to be seen as somebody buying before we were either A, at a noticeable bottom, or B, it was starting to trend back up. And what had happened was over the last couple of months, there were very large separate accounts of institutional clients that had not done any at all acquisition activity or investment of capital into real estate in 2023. And then we are more than halfway through 2024. And once the economists, and I would say that the general sentiment of the capital markets was that we will be coming into an interest rate environment that will be predictably sideways or in downward trending, the money started to come off the sidelines. And all of the, I would say, $50 to $150 million, I'm going to pick on multifamily because I can put my finger on that the best, opportunities that were out there, whether it's Connecticut, Long Island, Northern New Jersey, which is our market, the tri-state, they priced within expectations, and they have all, closed or are now under contract. And that gives us the transparency and the footing for, sellers to make transactions, whether, it's the bigger banks or the private equity funds. That's what they need in order to keep going. And now it's pretty pervasive that, with buy downs, you can get your interest rates into the 5s. I've heard in the high 4s on agency loans, which is everybody, perking everybody up and having them go out and relook. at opportunities that have not traded. And everything that we've had in our inventory, let's call it, that didn't find a home over the last 6 months, in the last few weeks. We have either put things under contract or we're in negotiations to have it put under contract, where you have a meeting of a buyer and a seller, and the spread has really come together very quickly. So I'm going to say I feel pretty good on the sales side, ending 24, coming into 2025. So I'll hand it back to you, Ian.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Lee, let's talk about the office market. Yeah, Ann shared that out of the $3 trillion with a capital T of expiring debt, $1 trillion of that is office related. If you could talk a little about, again, what your specialty is geographically, what you focus on. And I know you're in the trenches on office deals, working with mom and pop owners as well as larger owners with suburban office buildings. You've made your way into New York City and you've done deals in Manhattan. Love to get your insight, what you're seeing in the tri-state area.
Yes, thanks a lot, Ian. Yeah, I'm Lee Barnes with the Woodman Group. I'm the owner founder of the Woodman Group. We are a boutique real estate advisory group based in northern New Jersey, and we focus in northern New Jersey, and we specialize in the office market. We also do some retail and some industrial as well. So as far as the office market is concerned, we certainly have seen some challenges, since the pandemic. But there has been some recent positives, some good news in terms of leasing activity. We've seen a number, whether it's the metro area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or here in northern New Jersey. We've seen several deals over 100,000 square feet. Bank of America did a huge deal a couple quarters ago, roughly 550,000 square feet in Jersey City. In the third quarter, Regeneron did a deal in Warren, New Jersey for well over 100,000 square feet. Unilever is moving their headquarters into Hoboken. And we just recently heard that Samsung's going to be moving their regional headquarters into Englewood. So, again, there has been a lot of leasing as of recent, given the last quarter or so. But that said, over the last 12-month period, we've seen negative net absorption in northern New Jersey of 1.8 million square feet. So right now, the vacancies are sitting around 13.5%, availability rates around 16%. And I think that the only thing that's the saving grace here is really that there's been really little to no construction going on. And I think that's kind of true across the board. You're seeing that in the New York market, not a lot of construction going on, as well as nationally. So again, that's due to the scaling back of office space. Even demolitions has helped that availability rate stay at that 16% number, or the vacancy rate stay at the 13.5% number. And again, that's also attributed to the demolitions. I think 2.2 million square feet in the first half of 2024 were converted, whether it be into an industrial site or a multifamily site. So, so again, that is the saving grace here. But me as I do a lot of tenant rep, we do a lot of tenant rep work here. So it's also a positive for us because we have a lot of leverage with the landlords. There's a lot of concessions that are being given out in terms of work allowances, rental abatement. So it's also helped us get very good deals for our tenants. So
great. I have a quick question for you on renewals. Your tenants in the market, what are they thinking in terms of lease term? Are they trying to lock in long-term leases, lower rates, take advantage of landlords who may be in pain? Or is it, hey, let's be conservative, do a 3-year renewal, get paint and carpet, and see where we are?
Yeah, I think it sort of runs the gamut. I'm seeing both ends of it. I'm seeing people that want to do short terms to try to see where, I do a lot of deals with smaller businesses as well. So they want to see where sort of business is heading. So they might only look for, say, a 3-year deal. But there are certainly those tenants that want to take advantage of the markets and lock in, say, a 5 or 10-year deal. So yeah, we're seeing both right now.
Great, great. And before we switch over to Tom on industrial, I'd also just like to share a couple of observations in the office market and what I'm seeing in the online live bid space, which is the office sector is the most active sector right now. I think a big reason for this is owners of office buildings are in the world of reality if they want to sell their properties. And similar to what Ann said, a lot of these properties are performing high occupancy rates. What I always tell prospective buyers to look at is if you see an office building opportunity is look at the largest tenant in the building. What percent of the building do they occupy and when their lease is rolling over? So, I see situations with owners who have that tenant in 20% of the building, leases rolling over in 18 to 24 months. And the reality is high probability the tenant's going to stay, but high probability the tenant's going to reduce their footprint in that building. I commute into New York City every day, a lot of cranes in the sky, a lot of residential construction, and there is conversion of office buildings that lend itself to conversion. The Flatiron building, as an example, in the city was actually sold in auction due to a partner dispute. But Class A office buildings, new construction, absolutely crushing it. The flight to quality. Companies that are in, as an example, 20,000 square feet, they're willing to downsize into 10,000 square feet, and they'll pay more rent per square foot. Their annual costs won't necessarily go up. But a lot of people don't realize that Class A office is doing great, and a substantial amount of the vacancy is office buildings built before 2005. So just wanted to add to what you shared. Before we turn it over to the belle of the ball, the industrial market, Tom always has a smile on his face, seeing triple net rents in the industrial industry, higher than office and retail rents, Tom. So tell us, what's going on in your world on industrial in terms of supply and demand on both leasing and sales.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Ian, and welcome everybody to this. And I'm sure you had other things to do, so we do appreciate you guys spending some time with us here. Hopefully we can learn from your questions too, so feel free to throw those questions in there so we can stick around and answer them for you. But anyway, Tom Adavissimo, Griner Maltz, Commercial Industrial Real Estate. We were established in 1953 in the industrial sector. It's not because we're smart, it's really because we saw that the industrial was kind of like the ugly duckling, and we stuck with the knitting. We remained true to our roots, and we remained strong and still strong in the industrial market. So as a result of that, our database runs deep with all of the occupants in them, and we deal mostly with the user market. As consequences of being in the user market, we also deal with industrial landlords who own millions and tens of millions of square feet of industrial. So in order to make the marriage between client and landlord, we have relationships with them, and they turned into the investors for us as well. So this market is unique in the sense that there's that price discovery that everybody is thinking about. Nobody knows where it's going to be, and touched on it before with respect to appraisals. So being in the user market, it still affects us because there is a tightening on the liquidity part of banks, small banks, regional banks. They have lines of credit coming due. And then if you're a small business owner, which we're accustomed to working with, if you had to go for a mortgage or a loan for a line of credit, it might be difficult for you to get it. So even though the industrial market still is very strong, the demand is there, the wanting is there, but sometimes the liquidity is not there. So if there's people out there with good businesses and they have a little bit more cash than the rest, then they're going to rise to the top. But what are they going to do when they make an offer? They see that there are less horses in the race when they go ahead and put a offer in, whether it's lease or whether it's for a purchase. They're not going to pay the crazy rates when during COVID, when interest rates were very low, 2%, 3%. And there's a whole nother story to that too, which we'll touch on. Competing with industrial institutional buyers with 0% portfolios, that's a whole nother world. But the user market right now, they're kind of like looking at it as some who have good business as an opportunity. And then the mismatch now is with the sellers coming to grips that, well, they're not going to get their 250 a foot. They're going to get some number less than that. I was recently involved in a deal where we were lucky enough to close on it in spite of the fact that the appraisal came in $1.5 million less than the contract price, but they ran out of time in the due diligence. So here's the story. The backdrop was a 30,000 square foot building, and it came from the city. We were out in Bohemia with this building, and we had it in contract for $6.5 million. The appraisal came in at $5 million. They ran out of time on their due diligence, but they had to come up $1.5 million to close. But they were a user, they were willing to do it. So that is starting to happen. Banks are being conservative. They're telling their appraisers to come in less, 10, 15% less, just to cover. And some banks, if they have the reserve requirements, they may not be lending at all. And so I've seen deals where sometimes they actually go to private equity money. So users are tapping different markets in order to gain access to funds. I was involved with a deal where they tried to refinance a building that was 100% paid off. They had a $20 million company. They couldn't get a $5 million loan on their building. So we got them a mortgage broker who went out and shopped the market, and he got some PE money for them. And they were able to put a line of credit on it to grow their company. So these lines of credit are very important for, let's say, the growth of the economy. You can grow your company if you don't have cash flow, or if you don't have a reserve, an equity, a line of credit to cover yourself in the shortfall so you can have cash flow. So on the investor side, what happened on Long Island was that there was this mad rush for quality of real estate. Big boxes were coming into the market. They were institutional buyers with crazy money. They had $1 billion portfolio of funds, and they were coming in at half a point, and they were playing the arbitrage game. So they were bidding on 100,000 square foot buildings. They were overpaying for it by 20% or more. And then it really priced out the small business owner who was looking for it. So they went from 150 to 175 to $200 a foot on a building that they were going to go knock down and then pull a big box out of the ground, which, by the way, if they did a CCIM gap analysis on Long Island, they would have realized there's no way that our market could ever support 10 million square feet of 100, 200, 500,000 square feet of big boxes with 30 to 40 foot ceiling height and beautiful buildings that are right along I-95, but you can't get a truck on and off Long Island fast enough in order for it to make sense. If they did a gap analysis, maybe they would have realized maybe 2 million square feet of that inventory would have been perfect. You know, there were some people that could have consolidated into, you know, a footprint like that, but not 10 million square feet. So a lot of those projects, if you look, they knocked down the building, but the fence is still there. The sign is getting torn down from wind blowing it over, and nobody's really interested in, you know, renting these buildings out. The last deal that I saw being made on a big box was actually a pickleball court in a state-of-the-art 40 foot ceiling height warehouse, and they have a pickleball court. So that shows you that, well, a lot of the NBA propeller heads that were out there trying to convince their shareholders that this is where they park their money, they made a mistake. And all of the smart money was staying on the sidelines. All the old timers who knew the market knew that they would never, ever be able to substantiate that kind of cost and expense to build these buildings and try to get the rate of return that they desire. So it'll be interesting to see. So going back to where Ann was, I see on a lot of those TREP reports that some of these buildings are underwater, these brand new buildings. And from BlackRock, by the way, they have these LLCs set up. Their loans are actually on a watch list. They're empty buildings. So it's really interesting to see how this market's going to shake out. Now, anything under 100,000 square feet for users on our market, they're killing it because it's very hard to find. And as long as the expectation of the seller is in line with the market, they'll still be able to sell it. And there are buildings that I do see slowly but surely running parallel with what Ann is saying, is that a lot of these banks have been kicking the can down the road and not foreclosing on these non-performing notes because they're hoping that maybe the market will eventually catch up. But we're not seeing it coming so fast. And because that there's no money to lend, because they can't go to the bank and get their money, and because some guys, their businesses are struggling. So there are less horses in the race. There are less people to go out there and take these buildings out of the market and save them. So some of them will eventually have to foreclose. When, Ann was saying maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, I can see that. I can see that being possible because in New York, it's very hard to get a forbearance and a foreclosure agreement through the courts. It takes a long time for them to process that, and they're being overwhelmed right now. And a sharp borrower knows that all he has to do is plead, distress to the bank, or to the court. They won't foreclose. The forbearance agreement will be postponing the inevitable, and the foreclosure will be a long, lengthy process. And it could be 3 or 4 years before these buildings actually hit the market. And the question is, will there be buyers at that time? So it'll be interesting. But the other part of the component for Long Island and the tri-state area is that we're not a local market, we're a global market. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people outside this area with a war chest of money. And there is a lot of people out there just waiting on the sidelines, waiting to park their money somewhere. Industrial real estate is still a strong asset to have and to own. Good times are in bad. And we've seen that throughout the years. We've lived through a lot of cycles at Griner Maltz, and we've seen it. It's just a matter of time. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? It's a long-term hold, but it's definitely better than putting it in other food groups. And then I turn it over to you, Ian.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight. Couple of very interesting points that you share, which I also see, is that all these big boxes were built to satisfy users of 100,000 feet and up. And I assume if someone wants to lease 15 to 30,000 square feet, it's slim pickings in terms of options. But if you need big box space, you have a lot more options. I spoke to an investor developer in New Jersey. They recently acquired 6.5 acres on Doremus Avenue in Port Newark. Phenomenal location at exit 14 of the turnpike, near the port, near the airport. 6.5 acres, call it, 250,000 square feet of land. Let's assume 40% coverage. You could build 100,000 feet. They're building 30,000 feet. And they're going to have a ton of outside storage and vehicle parking. And they have a logistics type building that they feel the market really is looking for. And their rents will include, obviously, outside storage and other factors. So it was very interesting to see that in this new development, they're building 30,000 feet on 6.5 acres. So spot on. So while we get into the home stretch of today's webinar, I'd like to circle back to the group and talk about predictions for 2025. And you've gotten a glimpse into what's going on in CCIM New York metro area in different asset classes. Would love for you to, bring it on home and just share, your observations and what you think we're going to see in certainly the first half of 2025.
I think we're going to see a lot more of what I talked about earlier, which is a lot more extend and pretends, a lot more deals coming into lenders and servicers asking for those kind of deals, extend and pretend. I don't suspect we're going to see a bunch of losses in 25 yet, or some real mark to market yet. So I think 25 is going to be a lot like 24. Personally, I can't envision it being much different. By about 26, I hope that we say different things and that it's going to really start shaking out. But I just see a lot, I see a lot more rinse and repeat of what's happening in 24 personally.
So it sounds like our tagline may be sizzle in 26, you know.
Yeah.
A question I have for you is CMBS is non-recourse, is that correct?
Correct.
If a owner sends jingle mail, sends the keys back in the mail to the lender, what are the consequences of loan forgiveness from a tax standpoint? I assume the LLC and the members would have some consequences. Is that part of the services you provide in negotiating what that loan forgiveness looks like?
I'm going to answer like my grandson does, which I hate, which is yes and no. So let me tell you the two parts here. Every time I ask him a question, I get yes and no. First of all, let me first address the non-recourse piece because it needs to be further explained. Almost all commercial real estate are non-recourse loans. There are some that are recourse, but mostly they're non-recourse. The way I've served as an expert witness on non-recourse turning into recourse a couple times. I think the best way to explain it is if you, on a non-recourse loan, if you want to hand the property back to the lender, regardless of the value of the property, that's all they can get. They can't go after you personally. But, and that's a key point, if you destroy their collateral, if you have liens put on the property, if you don't take care of it and they think it's waste, if you didn't pay taxes and insurance sometimes, well, those things can now make it a recourse loan. So it's not simple, like you just mail back the keys as an example and say, here, I'm done, help yourself. Where it really is tricky is when there's no cash coming in from the property. So it's an empty building and there's plenty of those out there, or there's not enough cash flow to pay the bills, right? And the servicer, especially when they're holding the cash. So they might be in cash trap, cash management, servicers holding all the cash. And now the owner is going to have to keep things current, keep the property going, keep the taxes paid and all that during the length of time it takes for the servicer to take title. That could be a year. That's a lot of money. So it's very dangerous. The borrower's in a very, very tricky predicament when they want to hand the keys back. And that's why I sometimes recommend the receiver appointment, that the servicer appoints the receiver. So I just wanted to clarify that first. I am not a tax advisor. I don't even play one on TV or never. I stayed at a Holiday Inn, but that's about it, right? So I'm not a tax advisor. I tell every borrower to get tax advice. I do know what I'm told is that a foreclosure or a handback does not have immediate tax consequences. If you get a big forgiveness of debt, it could, but it's because it's non-recourse. The most I know is that it's all determined on your own basis in the property at the time. So it's really kind of an individual thing, either that or I just really, really don't get it. So we have other partners that we deal with that are these tax, experts that we loop in. So I'll stop there because that's not my area of expertise.
Thanks, Ann. Brian, capital markets predictions for next year.
I think it plays into a lot of what Ann is saying in the lenders. The institutional capital has come back. There are transactions which will set data points. The private capital will then follow. But in the capital markets, it seems that the pinch point is lending. And if you can't get your loans through the agencies and you're going to the balance sheet lenders, regionals, nationals, they're still looking at the health of their books. They want very large deposit offsetting balances, and it's making it tricky to transact if you don't go agencies. So it's I don't know, and I'd love to hear your take on it, but at some point, either the appreciation of real estate comes back into play and their ratios are solved, or they're going to have to recognize what they got and start to move it off the books. I don't know, but I think that's going to start to find its way in 2025.
You think it will in 25? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't play in your space.
Yes and no.
I'm connected enough on a bank board and other small regional and local lenders that they know they got problems. You just haven't had the maturity default yet. You don't have so much payment default.
Right.
It's more
Maturity.
just maturity default. You can't finance out of it. You don't want to do a cash in refi, and you can only forbear so long.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to make a decision.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's got to flush itself through before, you know, the non-institutional market comes back around, whether
Maybe
it's apartments, industrial, retail, picket, right? So sorry, I didn't
I was
mean
just
to.
gonna, no, it's your floor. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I was gonna add, what Brian just said is, I think, perfect in that probably multifamily might be the first ones we start seeing some real recognition of value, and office is probably the longer, 4 years, 5 years out, and probably in between you start seeing other property types. I think that's probably to further what he was saying. I agree with that.
Excellent. Thank you. Lee, predictions for office market for next year?
Yeah, I think you're going to continue to see some challenges in terms of you're going to see probably a lot more sublease space hit the market. You constantly are seeing people right sizing or downsizing. So I think there's going to be, more availability on the market. At the same time, as you alluded to earlier, I think, you're going to see more people flocking to the trophy class, 4-star, 5-star office buildings. And of course, that is going to lead to landlords having to give bigger capital injections. And so I think, there's certainly a correction, to be seen where, especially with all these maturities coming due, as Ann said, especially on the office side of things. So depending on the cost basis and where these buyers are able to get the buildings at, there may be some large cost savings there as well. But again, you're going to see availabilities can continue to rise. Sublease space is certainly going to be a driving factor.
Excellent. Thank you. And Tom, I know you touched on industrial, what it looks like. Anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I mean, as far as, 2025, I think pencils are down right now and probably will be for most people in my world up until probably, let's say, February. I think people are, if a deal is not in motion now, then it's probably not going to get in motion until people get a grip on what the new administration is. It doesn't matter who gets in. Nobody wants uncertainty. They all want to know what they're dealing with in the marketplace and how banks are going to respond, how the economy is going to respond to this new administration. What are their platforms and where the money is going to be? Is it going to be grant money? Is it going to be institutional money? Is it going to be help vis-a-vis IDAs, SBAs, some supplemental financing? Will it encourage people to feel good and come out? I think it's probably, like Ann was saying, it might be flat. Things will pick up after February, March once they realize what's going on, and then we'll see what happens as far as valuations go, and will they be up or down? But I think values might be flat, if not maybe teetering on the downside, but we'll see.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Before we wrap up, just also want to share some insight and predictions in the online live bid space, aka auctions. I purposely talk about online live bid. It's interesting. Yesterday, I attended a friend's viewing at Heritage Auction. They're auctioning off on behalf of HBO everything related to Game of Thrones. If anyone is a GOT fan, go to Heritage Auction site. You can buy every costume you imagine and have the best costume for Halloween, but a lot of other trinkets. But it's amazing to me with Heritage, Christie's, or Sotheby's, auction is a sexy word on high-priced assets. Real estate has always had that negative connotation. I do think in 2025, that is going to change. It's going to be more of a way people look at another disposition strategy. There's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines, as we all know, waiting to be deployed. Brian has mentioned it a number of times. Sellers are more realistic, and that bid-ask spread has definitely declined. I also think there had been a lot of underwriting uncertainty due to the unknowns of what was going to happen with interest rates. That's changing with anticipated, hopeful multi-rate cuts. And the the extend and pretend or delay and pray that Ann mentioned, I think things are going to sort itself out. It may be mid-year next year, but a lot of these assets will come to market, and people will see the benefits of an expedited transaction, as long as the due diligence is provided in advance and you're not going in totally blind, buyer beware. So thank you to our esteemed panelists, great content, and our keynote speaker, always providing excellent insight. And we'll be putting something on the calendar for Q4 and talking about end of year and beginning of year. So look for your calendars for something most likely in December. And wishing everyone a strong end to the year, and remain optimistic, and hope to be a resource to everyone, your CCIM Board of Directors. Thank you, Lee, for being our leader, fearless leader, putting together these programs, and we look forward to seeing everyone again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Take care.
Take care.
Ciao.